This is what you must do when a narcissist plans vindictiveness. When you step into the world of narcissistic relationships, you quickly learn that you're not just entering a relationship, a family dynamic, or a workplace bond. You're stepping into an emotional landscape that operates by rules no one warned you about. And tucked inside nearly every one of these experiences is a force most people never expect to encounter until it's happening to them. Vindictiveness. Not the passive-aggressive sulking many of us grew up around, not the cold shoulder someone gives when their feelings are hurt, but a sharper, more targeted form of retaliation that feels personal because in the narcissist world, it is. People often come to therapists and ask, sometimes quietly and sometimes with raw fear in their voice, how to defend themselves when the narcissist turns on them. They are not asking for theory. They are asking how to survive what feels like a campaign. And experts will tell you without hesitation that vindictiveness is not a rare glitch. It's a core operating system of narcissistic behavior. The psychology behind this retaliation is far more complex than pure malice. When clinicians talk about vindictiveness, they are describing an almost mechanical response inside the narcissistic mind. It is how they reassert power when they feel it's slipping from their grasp. It's how they soothe themselves when their grandiosity collapses. And it exists on a spectrum wide enough to shock even people who thought they'd seen everything. On the quieter end, it may look like gossip whispered into the right ears, or opportunities that mysteriously evaporate. A door that was once open suddenly closes, and you're left wondering what shifted. But as you move up that spectrum, the energy changes. It becomes sharper, more invested, and sometimes frightening. Psychologists describe cases involving stalking behaviors, online harassment, legal threats engineered to drain a person's stability, or even reckless actions that jeopardize someone's job, safety, or identity. The escalation can feel surreal, but to the narcissist, every step feels justified. What makes this experience so disorienting for victims is that the rules they thought governed human conflict simply stop applying. Most people experience a breakup, a disagreement, or a setback with sadness, regret, maybe some defensiveness. A narcissist, however, experiences those same moments as an existential threat. The shock comes when the person you once loved, trusted, or worked with suddenly seems to transform. But psychologists argue that nothing transformed. That part of them was always there. It was only dormant. In the clinical world, the moment that awakens that side of them is known as an ego injury, and it happens whenever the narcissist loses control of a situation, when they are rejected, criticized, confronted, or simply no longer needed. Shame floods the system, but instead of processing it, their psyche launches into attack mode, because acknowledging vulnerability feels unbearable. Retaliating becomes the way they restore equilibrium. They are not merely lashing out. They are trying to reassemble their identity. This is why leaving a narcissist, romantically, professionally, or personally, is rarely just a decision. It becomes a strategy. Therapists who specialize in this area routinely warn that post-separation abuse is not a maybe. It's a likely chapter in the story. The message behind the behavior is always the same. How dare you walk away? How dare you take control? How dare you exist without me? Victims often ask why the narcissist cares enough to come after them if the relationship is supposedly over, and clinicians gently explain that narcissists are not grieving the loss of the person. They are grieving the loss of power. Where healthy individuals may mourn memories, narcissists mourn control, validation, supply. So every text, rumor, legal threat, or smear is the narcissist's unconscious attempt to get that back. Because of this, psychologists push victims towards something that feels counterintuitive at first: preparation. Emotional preparation, legal preparation, social preparation. It feels defensive and even a little paranoid to gather documents, change passwords, alert trusted people, or quietly line up support. But clinicians emphasize that dealing with a narcissist requires a different kind of logic, one based on patterns rather than hope. And one of the most effective protective moves is shaping your own narrative before the narcissist tries to rewrite it. Quietly telling a few key people that there may be untrue stories circulating gives them a framework, to assess what they hear rather than taking it at face value. In the most volatile cases, where verbal threats turn into physical intimidation or stalking, therapists and advocates stress the importance of safety planning, which can include everything from breaking up in public, securing transportation, or involving law enforcement or shelters when necessary. The hardest part of this stage, and one that therapists hear about again and again, is the internal conflict victims face. Even when their bodies are sounding alarms, tight chests, sleepless nights, constant scanning for danger, their minds often reject what they know is true. Gaslighting does its job, not only when the narcissist delivers it, but when the victim internalizes it. Victims apologize to themselves for being afraid. They convince themselves they're overreacting. They hope the person they knew on their best day will suddenly return. But mental health professionals consistently remind survivors that denial is a privilege you cannot afford in a narcissistic breakup. And preparation is not wasted effort. If the storm never comes, you've lost nothing. If it does, you'll be standing on ground you've already fortified. What eventually becomes clear to those who live through it and those who listen to their stories is that the most life-changing realization is not simply grasping what the narcissist is doing, but why. Recognizing their vindictiveness as a psychological defense instead of a personal indictment changes the entire emotional landscape. It gives victims the freedom to stop internalizing blame, stop searching for the moment they caused the retaliation, and instead see the behavior for what it is, a desperate attempt to glue a collapsing identity back together. It doesn't make the behavior acceptable, but it makes it understandable, and with understanding comes power. Because when you stop personalizing the attack, you stop reacting to it emotionally and start moving strategically. And that might be the true turning point. Vindictiveness doesn't mean you must lose, retreat, or break down. It means you must shift from emotional reflex to intentional action, supported by therapists, advocates, lawyers, or loved ones, in order to protect your safety, your sanity, and your future. The narcissist's need to dominate can feel endless, but it isn't. Their reach ends the moment yours begins. And once you see the pattern clearly, guard your boundaries fiercely, and trust the voice inside that now knows better, you start reclaiming not only your story, but your life. When I look back on those early moments, what stays with me most is not just the chaos swirling around my life, but what it unleashed inside my body. It wasn't simply stress or confusion. It felt like my entire nervous system had been ambushed. Psychologists say the brain cannot reliably distinguish emotional danger from physical threat, and I learned that the hard way. When someone you trust suddenly turns on you, when accusations and retaliation blindside you out of nowhere, the body reacts as if a predator has appeared inches from your face. I can still recall the sensation, my chest tightening, hands shaking uncontrollably, thoughts spinning so fast I could barely catch one long enough to make sense of it. My muscles hummed with adrenaline, like an electrical current I could not turn off. At the time, I kept telling myself I was being dramatic or irrational. But later, when I learned more about trauma physiology, everything clicked into place. My body wasn't malfunctioning, it was protecting me. It was responding exactly the way a human nervous system is built to respond under threat. In truth, the shock came less from what was happening and more from who was behind it. When a narcissist unleashes their vindictive side, your entire sense of safety shatters in an instant. If I had been even a fraction more aware of what I was dealing with, if I'd recognized the red flags, the patterns, the subtle warnings, I would have moved differently. I would have prepared, set boundaries, and protected myself. Instead, I walked into the storm uncovered, and my body paid the price. This is why psychologists stress that knowledge is not just information, it is armor. So many targets of narcissistic behavior cling to the belief that reason will win, that goodwill will be enough, that if they simply explain themselves clearly, everything will settle. But narcissistic rage operates on an entirely different rule book. Understanding those rules often demands something many people resist: professional intervention. For a lot of people, this feels unfair or even impossible. Lawyers cost money. Legal support is intimidating. And when resources are limited, The idea of hiring someone can feel like one more burden on top of everything else. Yet experts who work with post-separation abuse survivors repeat the same point. Even one strategic consultation can shift the entire trajectory. It can transform chaos into clarity. It can show you where the lines actually are, what is enforceable, what is actionable, and what steps will protect you before things escalate further. For those who do not have the means, advocates urge victims to reach toward support networks designed for exactly these situations. Domestic violence organizations, legal aid clinics, women's shelters, trauma-informed nonprofits. Even when the law cannot immediately stop cyber harassment, reputational attacks, or covert sabotage, professionals can map out what is possible and how to prepare for what may come next. Among the most devastating tactics used by vindictive narcissists is the smear campaign. Mental health researchers call this a form of reputational assault, and it cuts on two levels at the same time. Outwardly, you are dealing with gossip, whispered lies, distorted half-truths that spread faster than you can refute them. But inwardly, you are wrestling with heartbreak, the shock of realizing that people you once trusted might be willing to believe the worst about you without asking a single question. The anguish doesn't come only from what the narcissist does. It comes from learning who chooses to stand beside you and who quietly steps away. That discovery is excruciating. But psychologists say smear campaigns carry a strange, painful clarity. They reveal who your real people are. Those who pause, who listen, who think for themselves. These are the ones whose loyalty runs deeper than drama. Those who vanish, excuse the behavior, or turn their backs may be showing that they were never capable of offering support to begin with. Even so, knowing this does not erase the emotional fallout. Betrayal registers in the brain like a wound, an injury to your belonging, your identity, your sense of worth. And when your community fractures, even temporarily, isolation creeps in. That is why experts insist that victims proactively build new networks of safety. A therapist who understands trauma, a support group who speaks your language, friends untouched by the manipulation. Each one functions like a stabilizing anchor. The more alone you become, the easier it is to doubt your own reality. Yet perhaps the most corrosive blow does not come from the narcissist at all. It comes from bystanders. Survivors often describe a chilling phenomenon. When friends, coworkers, or family members downplay the abuse, reinterpret the narcissist's behavior as overreaction, or insist that the abuser is simply hurt and lashing out. Psychologists call this secondary gaslighting. It can make a victim feel even more untethered than the attack itself, because now your nervous system is sounding alarms, your body is vibrating with fear, and people you thought you could trust are telling you to relax. That contradiction fractures your internal compass. Doubt takes root. Maybe I am exaggerating. Maybe I should give them another chance. Maybe the chaos is partially my fault. For those with childhood trauma or long histories of emotional neglect, this lands even harder. Old wounds reopen, old narratives return, and exhaustion replaces clarity as the adrenaline slowly drains away. The most extreme vindictive behavior often shows up in entrenched relationships where identity, resources, or reputation are entangled. But experts warn that intensity does not always correlate with intimacy. Sometimes someone barely in your life can become the most dangerous, particularly if entitlement, fragility, envy, or psychopathic traits are present. The unpredictability makes preparation non-negotiable. You cannot assume only serious relationships explode. You must rely on observable patterns, lack of accountability, hypersensitivity to rejection, a history of retaliation, and a belief that consequences are for other people. Ultimately, the purpose of naming vindictiveness is not to frighten survivors. It is to hand them back their vision. Because one of the most destabilizing parts of this experience is not the abuse itself, it is the dissonance. Your intuition screaming danger while people around you are shrugging it off. The human brain is not built to withstand that contradiction for long. That is why support systems are not luxuries, they are lifelines. Therapists help restore trust in your internal signals. Advocates help chart safe paths forward. Lawyers create boundaries that cannot be easily crossed. Each layer rebuilds your confidence, your clarity, your ability to act. Vindictiveness may feel like one of the darkest realities of narcissistic relationships, not because it is rare, but because it is often inevitable. And yet, survivors do much more than endure it. With insight, preparation, and the right support, they navigate it and emerge with their identity intact. When you understand the psychology behind the attack, you stop internalizing it. You stop being blindsided by it. And the moment you shift from absorbing the blow to protecting your peace, you reclaim the one thing the narcissist hoped you would never find again: your power to choose your next move.